This is a download from the BBC.
Today the programme comes from the Cape Town International Convention Centre in South Africa. We're here as guests of the British Council at Going Global, a conference for world leaders in education to debate the urgent international issues and challenges they're facing. And chief among them is the one we're going to focus on today. It's sometimes called human capital flight. It's more often known as the brain drain. We're going to not only explore why many, arguably too many, of the best and brightest people leave their homelands, but also attempt to come up with ideas to help stem that flow. To do that, we've acquired some instant brain gain in the form of our four distinguished guests. Professor Olusola Oyewole is Vice-Chancellor of the Federal University of Agriculture at Abeokuta in Nigeria and President of the Association of African Universities. Dr. Joe Beale is Director of Education and Society at the British Council, a member of their executive board and a former Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Cape Town University. Professor Tao Hsieh is Professor of Political Science at the School of English and International Studies in Beijing Foreign Studies University. And Carolyn Medel-Anonuevo is UNESCO's Head of Education Southern Africa region. So welcome to you all, to the audience here in Cape Town and to all our listeners wherever you may be. Now, just as Shakespeare originates in Britain but has spread across the globe, so too does brain drain. The term was first used in 1963 after the then UK Science Minister, Viscount Hailsham, complained about an American recruiting drive initiated by talent scouts specially sent over here to buy British brains. Half a century on, though, there's far more to this phenomenon than scientists opting to leave the UK for the US. So I want to begin by getting each of our four panellists to say what brain drain now means to them. And I'll start, if I may, with Professor Tao Hsieh from Beijing.
Well, to me, I think, brain drain is a significant number of people, skilled, well-educated, who emigrate out of their own home country, and they intend to seek permanent employment and settling down outside their home country.
Carolyn Medel-Anonuevo from UNESCO.
I think, as you mentioned, this term was developed in 1960s. No, but I think now we need to rethink this term, and we've listened to having brain drain, brain gain, and in this conference, there's a lot of talk about brain circulation. So I think the challenge is how to make sure that in a more complex world where we're able to travel more, we can also rethink the terms.
Joe Beale from British Council.
Well, British Council encourages people to move, encourages student mobility, encourages people-to-people exchange. So we wouldn't see people going to study abroad in countries other than their own as brain drain. And I guess my personal view is it's up to people where they want to be, and if they can find better lives for themselves in other places, that's fine. But what I would define as brain drain is when a country invests in human resources that it then loses to another country that hasn't made the same investment.
So is it fair to say a lot of what gets called brain drain, you're slightly sceptical about? It's just brain flow?
Brain flow, brain circulation, brain exchange, and a lot of it's very good for us.
Professor Olusola Oyewole from Nigeria.
Yeah, I would look at brain drain as the loss of movement of highly skilled professionals, the human investment of a country from where they've been invested to another country or location where that has not really invested in that human capital.
Do you think there has to be active recruitment going on for it to be brain drain? There has to be somewhere deliberately doing the draining, or does it just happen? They seep away?
It's just happening. There are many factors promoting brain drain, really. Sometimes it may be political, whereby the brain, in quote, may find it conducive to live in another country other than where it has been trained. It may be social, it may even be religious.
Okay, so we've got a reasonable amount of agreement with a little bit of digression on what the brain drain is. Perhaps we can now get onto the specifics of how it's affecting different parts of the world. And again, Professor Hsieh, can I start with you? Mm-hmm. How would you sum up the situation in China at the moment?
Well, China is probably witnessing the worst brain drain among all the countries in the world. As most of you realize that every year about 200,000 Chinese students go overseas for degree programs, about half of them for doctoral degree in UK or United States, and about 85% of them, according to some research, choose to stay in the UK or in the United States after they get the degree. Now, from the Chinese government's point of view, like you just said, we invested in their public education, their undergraduate education, and now they go pursue an advanced degree in the US or in the UK, but they don't come back, or at least at the moment they don't have intention to come back. We consider that as a brain drain. And so the government has also been trying many measures, try to lure them back. So again, to sum up, China is undergoing probably the worst brain drain in the world. But again, you can defer, such as Joe just said, it's a brain circulation. But from a nationalistic point of view, that's brain drain. Chinese born talents who have been lured away by other countries, they pay taxes outside China, they do scientific research for other countries, they publish papers in the name of other foreign research institutions, and the Chinese government would consider that as a significant brain drain.
Joe Beale, we'll get on to the particular case of South Africa in a moment, but you're Director of Education and Society here at the British Council. Are there broad similarities between what we've just been hearing about China and the situation in other countries where there is this net loss of talent?
I think what we face at the moment is a world where there is absolutely ruthless competition for the brightest and the best. So if you're talking about people who move as students, who move as doctoral candidates or postdocs or researchers, they will go where they feel most welcome. And there are efforts around the world, whether it's the US and Silicon Valley, which is 45% non-American-born people at the helm, whether it's Singapore that is actively investing in attracting talent, Kazakhstan, countries around the world are actively investing in attracting the brightest and the best for their own economic advancement.
As is the right of those countries and the right of those individuals.
Absolutely.
But isn't there, in some countries, a catch-22 situation? It's not that you can't do this, you haven't got the finances to do this because there are other pressing priorities. Those who you do manage to educate to these levels often move away, and therefore you then divert your resources elsewhere.
There is that, and I think when we work in partnership with countries that are affected in that way, we work very hard to do exactly that, work in partnership, find incentives for people to return, work on joint degrees and sandwich programs so that we are not part of the problem as British Council when we do attract students to study abroad.
You mentioned Silicon Valley, and I remember reading an amazing statistic that I think 1 in 4 patents currently being filed in the US has the name of at least one foreign national on it. But are there any countries that only have brain gain, not brain drain? Because I imagine even America, they lose professional footballers to the Premier League and they'll lose particle physicists to CERN in Switzerland or whatever.
Absolutely, and that is what my colleague from China has called brain circulation. No country is unaffected, and I think if you look at people who are mobile as part of their studies, as part of their careers, if you look at their trajectory over a lifetime, over a career, I think that long view would make it less likely to conclude that it was brain drain. I think many things come back to a country through people moving, whether it's remittances, whether it's support, whether it's support for the education of other members of their family. There's all sorts of ways in which brain drain is not really brain drain when looked at holistically.
And I did say I'd come back to the specific instance of South Africa, so what is the state of play here?
I think it would be fair to say that South Africa has a very good reputation in terms of holding its people. Its health service, for example, has preconditions and incentives for people to stay, so it doesn't train its health care professionals and particularly its medical doctors to leave immediately. They have to put effort back into their country, and I think those kinds of incentives are really important because it is saying we are a country, we are making a national investment in producing healthcare professionals, and we're not stopping you over your lifetime from moving, but we are saying you owe something back. And I think that's quite an interesting example of how a country is coping with that without curbing individual freedom forever.
Professor Oyewole, as President of the Association of African Universities, is this all sounding very familiar?
Very, very familiar. Let me just interject earlier